If you came here to understand how a man could live as a devoted husband, a church leader, a Boy Scout dad, and at the very same time secretly terrorize a city for 30 years, you're in the right place. By the end of this story, you'll know exactly how he did it, how he avoided capture for decades, and the single mistake that finally exposed him. This is the story of the BTK Killer, Dennis Rader, caught in 2005, but his shadow stretches all the way back to 1974. He was the most notorious serial killer Kansas had ever known. Driving through quiet neighborhoods, he would scan sidewalks and porches with a calm, calculating gaze. A woman checking her mail. Someone unlocking her front door. In his mind, he would quietly decide, "You're next." He gave himself a name that summarized his method with chilling simplicity: BTK. Bind them. Torture them. Kill them. It wasn't just a nickname. It was a ritual. He carried a hit kit into Holmes cords for tying victims, plastic bags to suffocate them, tape, knives, a handgun. He planned every movement. And when victims begged for their lives, he felt nothing. For 3 decades, he taunted police and media in a grotesque game of cat and mouse. Wichita authorities had little choice but to brace for the next strike. The fear was constant, unpredictable. But the most disturbing question lingered underneath it all. Was he born this way? How could one man be both a church-going family man and a sadistic predator? As one person later described it, it was like there were 2 people inside him, one a father and scout leader, the other an absolute animal. The nightmare began in Wichita, Kansas, a city once known as Cowtown because of its cattle drive history, later recognized for aviation. It was a peaceful place in the American heartland, more accustomed to tornado sirens than homicide headlines. In 1974, that calm was shattered by a storm of a different kind. Murders like this weren't supposed to happen here. People believed such horrors belonged to New York or Los Angeles, not to tree-lined streets in Wichita. On January 15, 1974, police were called to a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, they found something that would haunt them for decades. 4 members of the Otero family had been killed in what investigators would later describe as a ritualistic process. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and their 2 children Josephine, 11 and Joey, 9, had only recently moved to the area. An intruder had cut the phone lines and entered through the back door. He strangled Joseph and Julie first. He suffocated young Joey with a plastic bag, drawing up a chair to watch as the boy slowly died. Then he took Josephine to the basement and hanged her. For years, the details remained fragmented. It would take more than 3 decades before the killer himself calmly described what happened in court. He admitted he had confronted the family with a gun. Once he realized they could identify him, he decided to go ahead and put them down. He described bagging and strangling them in a disturbingly matter-of-fact tone. He even acknowledged indulging in sexual fantasies during and after the killings. To understand how this began, investigators and psychologists looked backward to Dennis Rader's childhood. Born in 1945 in Kansas, he grew up in Wichita, the eldest of 4 boys. By all outward appearances, his upbringing was ordinary. His father worked for the railroad. His mother worked at a grocery store. He fished by the river with friends, hunted, blended in. He wasn't exceptional, but he participated. Yet beneath that surface, something darker was forming. As a child, he later recalled feeling excited watching his grandmother kill chickens. Classmates would later say he had a habit of tormenting animals, sometimes hanging them rather than killing them quickly. He developed a fetish for women's underwear. None of this was visible to teachers or neighbors at the time, but the threads were there. Around age 11 or 12. An incident occurred that would fuse his sexuality with power and humiliation. After a teacher embarrassed him in class, He went to her house that evening and peered through her window. He had tied a rope tightly around his waist. As he watched her, he experienced sexual release. Rope, voyeurism, humiliation, dominance, these elements locked together in his developing mind. By his teenage years, he understood his fantasies were different. He later admitted that by 8th or 9th grade, he already knew what he would become. After high school and college studies, he joined the United States Air Force as a mechanic. He married in 1971 and began building what appeared to be a normal family life. But inside, his deviant arousal patterns intensified. He read detective magazines featuring bondage and murder. He drew elaborate fantasies. He called the force inside him Factor X. He studied other serial killers, not just out of fascination, but to learn from their mistakes. He wanted to avoid capture. On January 15, 1974, fantasy crossed into reality with the Otero murders. He returned home afterward in time to greet his wife from work. He later recounted a moment years later when his wife glanced at a newspaper message from BTK and noticed a spelling similarity to his own writing. He said he briefly thought he might have to kill her, but she never pursued it. Months after the Otero killings, he targeted 21-year-old Catherine Bright. He broke into her home, expecting her to be alone. Her brother Kevin unexpectedly walked in. Rader tied them up, but Kevin managed to break free. Rader shot him in the head and assumed he was dead. Kevin survived. Rader stabbed Catherine to death after a struggle. He later admitted he had forgotten some of his binding materials and believed that mistake allowed Kevin to live. He was nervous after that murder, convinced he might be caught. But no arrest came. When the press mistakenly implicated others in the Otero killings, he couldn't stand not receiving credit. He sent his first letter to police, promising more deaths if he wasn't caught. The cat-and-mouse game had begun. In 1977, he killed again Shirley Vian, a single mother. He entered her home while her children were present. He tied her up and strangled her with a plastic bag over her head. 9 months later, in December 1977, he murdered Nancy Fox in what he later called his perfect hit. He broke in, waited, convinced her he had sexual problems and needed to tie her up. He strangled her with a belt while prolonging her suffering for his own gratification. The next day, he called police himself to report the homicide. In 1978, local TV station Cake received a letter from BTK claiming responsibility for multiple murders and demanding media attention. He enclosed a poem and drawings. Gun and lock sales surged in Wichita. Fears settled into daily life. Then, silence. Years passed between murders. He went back to school for criminal justice, sharpening his understanding of law enforcement. He described potential victims as projects. He stalked them, studied routines, planned contingencies. He carried his black bag, his hit kit, with rope, plastic bags, duct tape, knives, gun. In 1985, he murdered Maureen Hedge, who lived just 4 houses from him. He established an alibi by taking his son to a Boy Scout camp, then slipped away at night, killed her, and returned to camp as if nothing had happened. He later posed her body in a church basement where she served as a deacon, photographing her in bondage near choir robes. He killed again in 1986 Vicki Weggerl after breaking into her home and attacking her upon her return. In 1991, he murdered Dolores Davis, strangling her and moving her body. Then he vanished again. Authorities speculated he might be dead or imprisoned for another crime. But he was living, openly raising children, serving as a compliance officer in Park City. In that role, he wrote meticulous citations for minor infractions, even measuring grass height with a ruler. He once pursued a leash violation case with extraordinary intensity. He exerted control wherever he could. Meanwhile, he kept trophies from crime scenes hidden in a backyard treehouse. He revisited his crimes through photographs and souvenirs, satisfying himself without killing. In 2004, on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, the Wichita Eagle ran a commemorative article, BTK Resurfaced. He sent packages, puzzles, and clues to media and police. He hid dolls posed like victims in cereal boxes around the city. He craved recognition again. Then came his fatal error. He asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. Through newspaper communication, they assured him it could not. He mailed one anyway. Forensic analysis revealed the disk had been used at Christ Lutheran Church and was last saved by a user named Dennis. Dennis Rader was president of the congregation. On February 25, 2005, police arrested him. The revelation stunned Wichita. Former classmates couldn't believe it. Neighbors were speechless. The mild-mannered church leader was BTK. He confessed over 33 hours, detailing 10 murders in chilling calm. In court, he described strangling victims with rope tied to bedposts, bagging heads, moving bodies. There was no visible remorse. He seemed proud. Victims' families spoke. They spoke of suffering, of faith, of anger. Some said no punishment would ever equal what he had done. He pleaded guilty, avoiding a trial, and received 10 consecutive life sentences. So was Dennis Rader born to kill? Experts remain divided. Some argue deviant arousal patterns formed early, conditioned through orgasmic association with power and control. Others suggest neurobiological factors. What's certain is this: he was not abused, not neglected. He lived a conventional life outwardly. One victim's husband put it simply: there were 2 people in that body, a father, a scout leader, a neighbor, and an absolute animal. For 30 years, Wichita lived with a ghost. He hid in plain sight, enforcing leash laws by day and replaying murder fantasies by night. His arrogance finally betrayed him, not through brilliance of police alone, but through his craving for attention. In the end, BTK was not captured in a dramatic chase. He was undone by a floppy disk and his own need to be seen. The storm that hit Wichita in 1974 lasted 3 decades. And even now, long after his arrest in 2005, the question lingers: how well do we truly know the people around us? Dennis Rader wanted status. He wanted power. He wanted control. But what he ultimately revealed was something far more unsettling: the capacity for unimaginable darkness to coexist with ordinary life, unnoticed, until it is far too late.